Hello, and welcome to our webinar from Metabase to Looker in 60 days, brought to you by CIS Consulting, Verse and Looker. My name is Ruth, and I am a data consultant at CIS Consulting, based in Madrid. And joining me on this webinar is Florent McCand, also known as Flo, and he is the former head of BI at the tech startup Verse. And he was in charge of implementing the new data platform. And then last but not least, we have Guillemette Frappa, also known as Gigi, who is an account executive at Looker and who works with small and medium-sized businesses throughout Europe. So in the next 45 minutes, we will be covering these topics, starting with looking at what a modern data stack looks like. Then we'll have an overview of what Versus BI setup looked like with Metabase. Then you'll hear Looker's approach to business intelligence and how it provided a solution for Verse, who was looking to adopt and embrace a new BI platform paradigm. And then Flo will go on to discuss some of the challenges that we faced during this migration project. And then I'll discuss how we, CIS, were able to lend a helping hand. And I'll give some key considerations when extending your team. And then we'll finish the session by hearing the final outcomes of the project. And we'll have 5 to 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions during the session, please just write it in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. So before we get into all things data, you probably want to know who we all are. So who is Verse? Verse is a social peer-to-peer payment app, which essentially allows users to create their own mobile wallet and split and share expenses with friends and create groups and events within the app, as well as having a feature called Verse Card. Essentially, it's a fintech company created in 2015 and is based in Barcelona, and it currently has 40 employees and is growing. And then who is CIS or CIS? CIS is a data analytics consultancy that has been in operation for 20 years in total and for 12 years in Europe, with offices in Madrid and Barcelona. And essentially, we help companies design, build, and maintain their data architecture. And we are also partners with world-class data technologies, meaning that we are able to introduce and implement the best tools to any business looking to improve the analytical processes and become truly data-driven. And then who is Looker? So Looker is a cloud-native data platform that was created to leverage the capabilities of modern data warehouses. It has a semantic modeling layer that allows developers to define standard business logic across the organization. It gives users access to real-time analytics, as well as allowing developers to assign robust data permissions at a row level, column level, and even content level. And then with its strict integrated IDE, all development is version controlled, meaning that data teams can work collaboratively on the model. So all of these features allow for data governance at scale, in addition to repeatable, flexible analysis, as well as being a platform that promotes self-service analytics with a customizable user interface that really encourages all business users to interact with the platform. And then I guess a key feature that perhaps sets Looker apart in the world of modern analytics is its ability to allow businesses to operationalize their data and integrate the platform into their day-to-day workflows. So this essentially moves analytics away from being an afterthought and rather being the driving force in business decision-making and action-taking. So when all of these things come together, we essentially can achieve a data modern stack. And this really sets the tone for what we're going to talk about in today's session. Verse was a company that was looking to modernize their data stack. So we first need to understand what that looks like. And before we can really get into what a modern data stack looks like, we first must understand what a traditional BI analytical process was, how it was formed. So many of you who are logged in today may have been working in data for many years and may be very familiar with this process, with this very long and tiring process. So at the start, we have our raw data collection from our various sources of data, which we would extract using ETL tools, ETL standing for extract, transform, and load, potentially built by our in-house data engineers. And during this stage of the process, the tools would carry out some heavyweight transformations to leave the data in a specific format that our legacy or on-premise data storage tools or warehouses could read. The BI team would then spend hours taking extracts from specific data sets to build cubes that could answer specific questions from a business user. And more often than none, the end result would only be able to answer what happened as opposed to why it happened. And if a business user came to them with a new question or requested to see the data in a slightly different way, well, the data team would have to go back to the first step where the T was happening in ETL and start the whole process again to carry out these new data transformations. So this traditional BI process brought up many issues, including the fact that it was slow, inflexible, and very limiting. However, in the last decade, new approach to BI has been born. A key feature of the modern approach is to drop the T from ETL and deal with transformations later, allowing data teams to quickly extract and load all of their data set and not just subsets, using tools like Fivetran, uploading them into a modern data store like Snowflake or BigQuery, which are more performant and less structured databases. And at this stage, teams can decide to apply their major data transformations, or in fact, using tools like Looker that sit on top of your database and use Looker's unique modeling language, they're able to complete the transformations here instead. So this new agile process has made more data available to everyone in the organization, allowing more business users to freely explore company data. And it allows users to ask any question and have the answers returned to them in a matter of minutes rather than hours or days. And this is made possible due to the fact that the transformations are taking place at a later stage in the process. So there's no need to start this whole process over again at the upload, extract and load stage. But simply in Looker, with a few lines of LookML, you're able to transform your data and present your data in the form that your business users want to see it. So this modern approach to BI has also given the opportunity to business users to access their data on third-party apps like Google Sheets, or in fact integrate the platform into custom-made applications using the Looker API. So all this paradigm shift in and this change of mindset in the BI approach has made the process a lot more simpler, a lot more performant, and a lot more flexible. And so this is the approach that Birth really wanted to embrace. And so I'm going to pass you over to Flo, who is going to explore the stages that Verse had to go through before they arrived at their modern data stack. Over to you, Flo.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. Hi, everyone. I'm Flo. I was head of BI at Verse when we went through this migration from this very well explained previous and old traditional data stack to the more modern data stack. This is the setup that we had at Verse. The main data source was the production databases with backend data from the main application. And we also had some spreadsheets with marketing information inside. We had a script in Python. It was in fact a Python app living in a container to do the data ingestion and data transformations. We were doing transformation in SQL and in Python. This app was populating a BI database in Postgres too. And it was also populating, so applying some BI logic into spreadsheets with some KPIs in there. In the final step, in the visualization layer, we had Metabase, which is an open source BI tool. It's like a SQL runner, when you can also add charts and dashboards. Our business users, our users was also using a direct client living on their laptop called DDiver to access this BI database. This was our previous data stack, and it was leading to many limitations, both in the architectural way and also in terms of usage. So with respect to the architectural limitations, this Python app was composed by more than 4,000 lines of code. It was a monolithic app executing the code in a sequential way, lasting 9 hours. And we were also missing an important data source, which was Firebase events. It's a mobile app development toolkit. You can populate events on your app. So each time that a user is doing an event and is doing an action in your app, an event will be sent. It's super useful to do behavioral analysis, to construct funnels, so to understand your user's behavior. We were missing also this data source. This architecture was leading us to a slow development. So when we wanted to add a new field, we needed to add new SQL code to this Python app, to release a new version of this app, to run it in production and wait in production and not in development, and wait 9 hours to see the changes. It was very slow to debug. We had frequent errors. We had to say to our business users, we are very sorry, you will not have updated data today. So in terms of scalability, it was a pain point, it was an issue. And in terms of technical scalability, we were also seeing that Postgres, Metabase on top of Postgres was having a sometimes it was having slow query runtime, and we also had to maintain both the database, the BI database in Postgres, and the Metabase instance. So now with solutions like BigQuery and Looker, there is almost no administration to do in terms of instances. I think it was I still think it was the right approach at the beginning of a startup where you have very few resources and the budget is limited. But we also need to keep in mind that it's not free. So when you have 9 hours of computing every day, it has a cost. In terms of usage, we were suffering what is known as the data analyst bottleneck. It means that we have everyone from operations, marketing, and so on that want a result, want an answer to the data question, and there is only one or two analysts. In our case, for 40 people, we were 2 people in the BI team. The analyst was also more focused on getting the data and not on adding value, on adding analytical thinking, adding business value. Moreover, the SQL was a hiring requirement for other teams. In terms of metrics and insights, well, we had data chaos, metrics chaos, where you have several definitions of the same metric living on the Python app, living on Metabase, living on the Beaver application on each of the user's laptop. Those unwritten queries can lead to errors. So at the end, the main issue was that people were not trusting data, which is the worst that can happen for a BI team, right? So we are there to make people trust what they can see in terms of data. Finally, we were surfacing a very small portion of insights, as it was complicated to go to the raw data, and this was limiting how the company could make data-driven decisions. You can see in this slide the kind of experience that our user had. So still waiting when they were loading Metabase. This is a Metabase dashboard. So I will now let Guillemette explain how Looker could help us to solve those limitations.
Thank you, Flo. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, guys. I am Gigi. I'm an account executive at Looker. So just to come back on what Florent was saying, it was really urgent for us to change that situation because they had a big challenge happening. They were applying to get a banking license and they were looking to start monetizing their services. So obviously, what they were thinking is, how can we do that successfully if our team cannot find the right profile of users that are more likely to pay for our services? And then how can we retarget them with a proper campaign or the proper features or offers? So what they said to us, if we can't fact-proof our decision, if we cannot monitor our activity, it's going to be really difficult to make this initiative successful. So what Luger brought in the table was three main things. So the first that you see on the right is the fact that they finally had access to a unique source of truth through the modeling layer. So this is really important because what Flo was saying at the beginning, when they were doing some dashboard and queries and analysis, they were not always able to trust the data. So the big advantage with Looker and our modeling layer is that if you look at the margin, for example, it's the same for definition for everybody, and you can trust it and everybody can share and use this definition. The second point is that finally, Florent team was able to deliver the power of data to the business. So we have this explore space where people who don't know SQL and who don't really have time to write queries, they can build their own analysis. And from there, they don't need to wait anymore and they can self-serve. So this is super important because the team could really act fast. And finally, the last point, the operational data was finally available. It basically means that it was data that the team could use to improve their activity and improve the way they were making their decision. So I give you an example. I think Metabase was totally able to say, hey, your conversion rates increase. And this is a great news. But imagine you are the marketing manager. How is this going to help you to be better at your job? It gives you no indication of what you did well and how you should do that again. So the big idea with Looker is that as a business user, I can drill into this data to understand which campaign, which channel, or which segments of people had an impact on the conversion rate. And from there, I can understand, okay, so this is what happened. This is why this increase happened. And you know how you can replicate it and be better next time. So this really made a big difference for Verse team because I understood that this was a way to really be data-driven. And this is why any company that wants to take this direction, that wants to make data available for everybody, is always a good fit with Looker. So I think that's okay on my side, and I will leave Florent to explain a bit more about the migration.
Thanks, Bimet. So this was not only about changing a visualization tool for another one. As you can see in this slide, we were talking about redesigning the full analytics stack. Looker were enabling us to go for BigQuery and also to do transformation both on BigQuery and Looker. So in terms of sources of data, we have the same one than before, but we add Firebase events. Why so? Because it's very, very easy if you have BigQuery to just with one slide to activate the export of Firebase events from Firebase directly to BigQuery, as both of them are Google products. There is also a native connection for spreadsheets. And so with respect to the main data in the production databases, we add a Python app, but in this case with no BI logic at all, only copy pasting data from PostGUI to BigQuery. It was modular and the full process was only 2 hours. So if there is an issue, you can rerun some separate part of it. The database, the data warehouse chooses BigQuery, and finally, on top of that, Looker, with transformations happening in BigQuery with something called scheduled queries, or in Looker with something called persistent derived tables. And now we will see what are the differences and when we should go with an approach or the other. So the two options are similar in the fact that both are generating SQL queries that generate results that are saved in BigQuery so they can be accessed by later queries. But in case of the BigQuery scheduled queries, we are talking about a code that you can that is shared, that exists in a collaborative interface, but it's not versioned. There is, if you want to execute sequential queries, you will not have an execution plan. So the execution plan is fixed. Then it's possible to do to create those queries programmatically. But well, at the end, we used it for the long transformations, for the transformation that were lasting more than 15 minutes. And we also did it for transformation that we wanted to access them outside Looker also. So we think that it's not a scalable way of going forward for transformations if you face many transformations. So the second option is Looker persistent derived tables. The results are written into a Scratch schema in BigQuery. In this case, you do have the versioned code from Looker. It's easy to control the execution plan for cascading derived tables. And it's also easy to monitor the possible errors, as you can see at the end of the slide. So there is also two kinds of persistent derived tables, the SQL-based one and the native one. If you use native one, you will be reusing LookML objects. So it means that the code will be way clearer to handle changes. And finally, Looker is still improving those PDTs, those persistent derived table, as they recently released an option to publish those views, so you can make them available outside of Looker by other services consuming from the BigQuery table. So that said, how is so what is the strategy to do this kind of migration? So the theory was super clear. We are going to go to recollect the dashboard requirements with each department. We are going to define those Looker explorers, which are the access point for data to the final users. Then the BI team needs to model the logic. We create some sample dashboard and we train our users for their self-service with the tool. But in the practice, there are some aspects that we need to think about. We need to compare the business need with the existing content. Some business users were hoping to have an exact replacement of their visualization, but we wanted to help them to go a bit further and to understand if they need more mature metrics, if we could change outdated measures, and so on. This was one part. The other part is that you need to still give an answer to be available for the business, so you don't have so much time for migration. Then people, your business user normally thinks the final outcomes, they think in dashboards, not in explorers. So you need to also make them change this aspect. And we also needed to learn BigQuery. We were quite SQL savvy in Postgres, but BigQuery has some specificities, and also to learn LookML. So this is the timeline, the implementation, all the steps that we follow. First, you start with a free trial with Looker. You start a 2 weeks free trial and you validate if Looker, you connect Looker to your main database, to your data warehouse, and you validate that Looker is an option for you. After that, you will have a 8 weeks jumpstart where Looker or SIS can help you, will teach you how to use LookML. You will have a code dev session each week to learn LookML. We started working on the BigQuery transformation, on this first layer of transformation that should be done on BigQuery. And then we went for the persistent derived table, this second layer of transformations. We could then apply some modeling to create the explorers and the dashboards that we could deliver to our end users. We train them. Looker and SIS can also help us on that. And finally, unfortunately, you also have to refactor sometimes some early projects as you were a bit newbie about Looker. So we iterate between step 3 and 6, and we were also inserting new projects, new demands on the fly. So instead of creating something elsewhere, we were creating those new projects directly on Looker. We faced hundreds of existing charts and dashboards living on Metabase, individual queries living on dbeaver, on the individual laptops of our users. So it was a lot to migrate. And that's when you are ready for when your transformation are done, your first modeling layers are done, you can ask for some help with for some external help, and we add Root in our team for some weeks, and now Root will explain her experience.
Thank you, Flo. So yes, you may be asking where the CIS sit in all of this. And as Flo mentioned, they were working a 2-person BI team, and they wanted to be able to deploy and transition to Looker as quickly as possible. So they gave us a call to lend a helping hand, and I was actually the consultant on the project and spent a month in the offices and formed part of their BI team. So what made Verse and CIS a perfect team? Well, firstly, the fact that they were looking for local expertise in LookML to help them continue and build their model, as well as just gain additional support after their initial implementation project. Also, as Flo mentioned, they had a significant volume of content, over 100 reports and queries that had to be migrated. So how did they know that they were ready to add someone to their team? Well, most of their relevant data transformations had already been completed, meaning that the platform was more or less ready to start creating content. And as one key objective for Verse was that they wanted to transition to the new tool as smoothly as possible. By having me on their team, Flo and Alba, who was the other data analyst, could tend to the new daily requests of the business users whilst having an additional resource, such as myself, who could focus on translating old content into new Looker content. And so finally, with our collaboration, this would also ensure that they had an extra level of business user support and training, and just help promote that data culture throughout the organization. And so here we have 4 fundamental pillars that any company needs to consider and have in place when hiring external consultants and when going into migration projects in general. Firstly, it was key that someone from the organization explained business context. So for example, in the Verse project, the chief of staff gave me a detailed explanation of all things Verse, from the business activities to the different teams that were in the organization and the different initiatives that the company had in progress. So this was a really important step, as all the data being collected and analyzed is to tell a part of the business story. So it would have been almost impossible to interpret that business story if no context was given. Next, we have sharing a data dictionary and metrics definition. So I would say that a major hurdle that we faced during the migration project was the fact that many of the definitions for queries in Metabase were not coherent in different places, or were in fact obsolete. So for most people going into these kind of projects, it may be really hard to define everything before the project starts. But thanks to Looker now, that Verse has a centralized data dictionary, but this is a point of consideration, making sure that you have all your metrics well defined before you start building out. In my case, I joined the Verse project as an active consultant halfway through their transition process. So much of the data model had already been created. So it was very important that the model design itself was explained to me. So as a general tip for data teams that embark on these kind of projects, it's really important to document the process so that new developers can come in and pick up where other developers have left off. And then finally, a point on project management. So in this case, Verse took the lead in terms of managing the project, but many companies will ask companies like ours to help control this aspect of these kind of migration projects and all kind of data projects. And so maybe 4 key points that I would highlight in this process is A, not to be too ambitious. When following agile methodology, it's best to have a narrow scope with incremental objectives, and that allows you to have better control. Next, have a checklist. In the case of Verse, we had listed out everything that needed to be completed, from creating new material and listing the material that needed to be migrated. And this checklist really allowed us to keep track of the progress. C, I would say, make sure that you check all the code that you write before you push to production, rather than trying to put out fires after the fact. As Looker is a tool that allows for continual iteration over the code and rapid deploys to production, it can be really tempting to press that deploy to production button, but always make sure to check that your code doesn't break any existing content. And then finally, I would say, as a final recommendation for project management, is to have a change management plan of action in place. So it's all good and well having or implementing a new tool, but an essential part of the process is ensuring that your business users are using it. And this includes having clear lines of communication. So if your users have doubt, do they know where to go and who to ask? And have they been given appropriate training? So these kind of ideas and concepts need to be put in place as a definitive part of your project. So with all these things in mind, you can expect a successful project, and hopefully with a hand from an ally like CIS. So I'm going to pass you back to Flo, who will just present a few of the outcomes from the project.
Thanks, Rose. Let's talk a bit about adoption, about how you make your users to start using Looker. In Verse, we had a fantastic adoption from our business users. I think they knew they were using something quite old-fashioned with all the problems that we mentioned before. So they were very eager to go for the new tool. It's true that it helps that they were familiar with SQL-like logics, as those explorers can have some familiarities with SQL, although you don't have to be an SQL expert to use Looker at all, right? We identified champions in each of the team that were able to engage with the team member to use Looker more and more. And as it's super fast to build on top of Looker, you can, in very few weeks, populate all the new demands that they have, and they can see the results. I would say that it's also a good idea to play with the licenses. When you first reach an agreement with Looker, you will define the number of Explorer and Viewer licenses that you will have. The viewer can only view, explorers can explore. Although we didn't have so many Explorer licenses we would like to, we opened the licenses to everyone during the first month. So you give everyone the opportunity to test the platform, to be data-driven, and then you will adjust your cost a few months later. We can do that because Looker is flexible with respect to that. So this is with respect to the business user. With respect to the BI team, we needed to spend a lot of time with every user. Some of them we know are more advanced, other not so much. So we need to spend time with them and to teach them. They were used to come to us and ask for the results. So it wasn't the case anymore. Now we were helping them to get these results. This time for sure will repay in the future. And then in terms of the BI team, we were also at the beginning, we were modeling and creating content in Looker, but you will stop creating content and you will start administering the platform. So we have two very nice quotes here for our business users. The fact that they feel empowered to finally be able to reach the solution to their questions, it's fantastic. And also from the BI team, not creating a single dashboard or executing a direct SQL queries in the last months, it's also something very, very nice for us. So you can compare here examples of how was the dashboards in Google Sheets before and how they could look like now in Looker. many additional features that Looker have with respect to Google Sheets. And you can also see in the next slide how Looker is more than a BI tool, it's a data platform. We linked Looker to Braze. Braze is a marketing tool used to send push notification and emails or SMS to your final users. You can identify user segments directly in Looker and send them to Braze. You can schedule how those cohorts can be sent to Braze. It's super quick. You can imagine someone from the marketing team without SQL knowledge creating cohorts and then updating those user properties in Braze so they can run a direct campaign. The previous process was handling more than 20 SQL queries in the individual laptops, exporting the results of those queries to a CSV, and then uploading them to Braze. So for sure, it improves the time to action, and it enables everyone to make these kind of actions. So this is it on my side. I think you could have an overview of how was our journey migrating from Metabase to Looker Adverts, and I will let Ruth handle the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Flo and Gigi. So yes, I know we've run a bit over time, so we'll just have 5 minutes to do Q&A. I'd also like to introduce Anwar to the panel, who is a pre-sales engineer at Looker, so he can answer more of your technical questions. And so I will just put some questions to our panelists. We have one for Flo. We have a question. Did you consider any other BI tools, and which other BI tools did you consider at your time of evaluation, and what encouraged you to choose Looker in the end?
Yes, so we considered Tableau because I think it was cheaper, and we considered Chart.io because I had experience with Chart.io, but we went for Looker because we had this kind of already SQL savvy users, because we wanted to go for this modern approach, and none of us were data engineers. We didn't want, so we were very focused on buying versus building, so we wanted to have this kind of logical modeling, and we also considered this kind of advanced integrations with other tools, and also in order to do some data science, some more advanced machine learning projects, we wanted to have something like Looker as a data platform.
Thank you very much. I hope that answered your question. Yep, great. Okay, so our next question is a more technical question, so I guess it can go to Anwar. So we have a couple of technical questions. So we have one that says, what other databases is Looker compatible with?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you, Ruth. So yeah, probably like when Flo presented, it was only mentioned in BigQuery, but when Looker, we can connect to more than 50 dialects of SQL, so including most of the famous database, and we're also able to host Looker in different cloud. So we're purely a multi-cloud player, not only on the databases that we access to, it's more than 50, or where we host our platform, which can be in multi-cloud as well.
Amazing, thank you. And I'll put this second question to you as well. Yeah. Are there any other types of usage of Looker beyond exploration and visualization? I think Flo touched on it in his presentation, yeah, but perhaps you can give more examples.
So yeah, no, I always push through this kind of scenarios because, like, I mean, the value of Looker go beyond just the BI. So we do BI and we do it very good. And I think the Florent use case scenario, or he presented, he really mentioned that. But it's also to think about the efforts that you're making in building the Looker platform could also be reusable or be used in other platforms. So we have use cases where people will connect to the Looker API to start machine learning workflows, or as Florent mentioned, to activate the data. So taking, for example, a user segment and send it to marketing automation tool, or if you have, like, for example, campaign management tools you can connect to, and you can use the analytics effort that you have done in Looker. So like all the KPIs you built, you can leverage them to alert and send that data to other platforms to be reused. And this is very interesting because it really puts the data in the heart of the processes of a company. And if you add to that the fact that all the data is governed and controlled by the data team, it will make the user comfortable taking action based on that data because they trust it and they can leverage it in other platforms as well.
That's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And then we have a fourth question here. I think we can put this one to Guillemette. So what would be the next steps, or what would be the quickest process that would have to go through to implement Looker? So how long will it take? So next steps and how long will it take?
Sure. So, well, I guess it depends on what we mean by next step, but basically the process is into 3 phases. So there is the discovery phase where you're going to meet a Looker team, you can have a demo, you can ask questions around Looker. And then the second phase would be to do a trial, or what we call at Looker proof of concept. So the proof of concept is basically a live trial on Looker. So we would connect to your database. We would do different code dev session to allow you to test Looker and build some use case. So the goal is really for you to trial and challenge Looker and see if it's the right fit for you, both on the technical aspect and on the business aspect. And then if you're happy with the trial, I guess you become a customer of Looker. And from there, we have this third phase called Jumpstart that Flo talked about. So this Jumpstart, you can define, we can scope it, and we can define how long you want it to be. Some customer want it to be really fast, and we really have to do as many code dev and training session as we can in the first weeks. And for other customers, they like to spread that over a period of 3 months. But I would say generally the entire phase, from the moment you meet us to the moment it's implemented, it's about 3 months in general.
Thank you very much. And then I guess I'll just take this last question. And I guess I could answer this, as it's about external teams. So the question is, if we depend on an external team, how can we ensure that we will be self-sufficient post-project? And I guess a key thing for us as consultants is to make sure that we leave the client self-sufficient. So we're not only there to implement a quick project, but throughout the whole entire process, we will be working with the developers, we'll be training them, we'll be training any additional business users that require any additional support. And then after the project has ended, we'll always be available for any post-project support or help that you need with a simple phone call or an email. And that's kind of how we ensure that you have continual success and it's not just a one-hit wonder, so to say. So yeah, I guess that's how I would answer that. So hopefully at the end of the project, you will be self-sufficient with being able to through the business training, and by being able to look at the code that we've created and using it as an example. So that's how I would answer that. And I think we have now been going for almost an hour. So I would like to say thank you to all of our panelists for answering these questions. Thank you to our audience for tuning in. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email us or contact us via LinkedIn. We will be happy to answer. We'll be happy to offer any demos if you're interested, or if you just want to play with the tool, then get in contact and we can give you the opportunity to do so. So I just want to say thank you, stay safe, and talk soon.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.